Hello and welcome to the Visual Hierarchy lecture. Today we're going to talk about visual hierarchy, how to accomplish visual hierarchy, and how visual hierarchy works together with the elements of design. There are three things we need to remember when we're defining visual hierarchy. One is that it's primarily about organizing the information on the printed page. Two is that it's a visually tiered system, meaning we can actually see the emphasis of information as more or less important based on formatting. So it's a logical order of information that we attain using the tools. And three is that it's a guide. People don't read things if it doesn't make sense, and so visual hierarchy is what allows us to make it easy on the readers to process the information. What is a visually tiered system? Well, essentially, it's pretty easy. The more important or higher priority information is given more visual emphasis. So those are things like headlines, titles, things like that. Less important or lower priority information is given less visual emphasis. So things like copyright information at the bottom of a website. It's smaller and it's also at the bottom. Those are ways we can give it less visual emphasis. The idea of visual hierarchy is to organize each area of emphasis so that it does not conflict or take away attention from another area. Here's an example of adding visual hierarchy. On the left, we have text that has all the same formatting. On the right, we've applied some hierarchy. We took the headline and made it larger. We took the copyright information or the credit and made it smaller. So we have three levels of information, and it's easier for us to see and understand the information with this formatting. Visual hierarchy has two equal purposes. The first is visual organization. The purpose of desktop publishing is to make the intellectual information more easily read and more quickly understood. Visual organization tools like hierarchy, visual hierarchy, help us lead the viewer through the document in an order that has the most meaning. Second is that it applies visual appeal. Certainly a goal that we have as designers, and it adds legitimacy and professional appearance to the client's work. This means we have to be concerned about communicating the message, not just how it looks. So how do we decide what's most important and second most important, etc.? Well, you have to actually read the information, and all of us are guilty of kind of breezing through things, but actually reading the information is the most important step here. Then we take that information and we begin to organize it based on logical order of importance. What do we think is the most important thing to take away, second most, etc.? Then we use visual emphasis so that we can differentiate between the information groups. The corresponding video that's with this playlist will give you information on the specific tools that we have to be able to differentiate. Let's look at an example. If we were given this information, we'd see an article, perhaps we'd see there's a little bit of proximity between the top two items, but it doesn't really look particularly interesting. There's no hierarchy applied and there's no visual tiers. Then we see this example after we've applied some formatting. Terrorists tap into YouTube. Automatically much more interesting to our readers simply because we've given them a focal point, a place to jump into the content. Then we have our lead, the first sentence or paragraph that summarizes the story, Islamic terrorists using YouTube to spread propaganda. And then we have the body, the rest of the article. So it's easy for readers to understand that this is important information and that it's interesting simply because we've added formatting. So here are some things we need to keep in mind when we are trying to establish hierarchy. We don't want to have too many levels of information, so no more than about 5 visual levels on an information page. We should be able to organize things into less than or equal to 5 groups of importance and then apply formatting to all the things in each group. So if we have a headline, that would be 1. If we had date and time information, that might be level 3. And all the information that falls into a level should have the same formatting. Don't be a wimp when it comes to using contrast. This is in our optional textbook. Don't be a wimp when it comes to using contrast. Don't make people guess whether or not something is more or less important. Make it very clear when we're using contrast. Avoid using only color to create hierarchy. Color is the weakest of the methods to create hierarchy, and so it's better when it's paired with something like weight or something like size to really make sure it's clear. And then don't lose sight of the needs of your viewer. Make sure that we are showing this to other people who aren't as familiar with the information and that they're able to decipher the different levels. All right, so how does visual hierarchy fit when we're looking at applying this with the information we've already learned? Visual hierarchy and the principles of design come together to make successful page layouts. some examples here. If we have this list on the left, Ritz crackers, wheat bread, and so on and so forth, we can strengthen this list or this group of items just by applying repetition. So giving it all the same formatting and all the same bullet point or checklist boxes. Then if we add proximity to this, we can break it into two sections and makes it easy to understand where one list ends and the next one begins. Then if we add alignment and contrast to this, we can see that there are things to do on one day and things to do on a second day. The formatting of the alignment makes it easy to read where one day begins and the next ends, and then the today and tomorrow are the easiest things to understand as far as that hierarchy of understanding what's important and what's second most important. So we see that the actual items on the to-do list are the third level because they're details to the things that tell us that this is a list and what categories these things fall into. So a list of some references here that can be helpful for learning more about this, but overall that's the basic introduction to visual hierarchy.